So we could just do that. Yeah, one introduction and vote once again, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll call the meeting, January 11th meeting of the Trees and Greenery Committee to order again. And first thing on the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of the December meeting.
I move to accept.
Take it by Pat, seconded by Dennis, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next piece, tree removal request, Pease wastewater treatment plant.
Yes, these are, thank you. 2 maples. They were requested for removal by workers at the wastewater treatment plant. It's in their parking area, and there's a maple that's in pretty rough shape between 2 of their buildings. So they look pretty rough as far as they had some limb failures, open wounds, everything. So it's just safe for considering the use area to just remove.
Any questions for Max? Do we have a motion to recommend removal? Dick?
I know I'm going to have to abstain. Deb and I went out and we couldn't find the trees. We couldn't.
Well, we couldn't get in.
Oh, was it?
We've been on a Sunday
or something? Oh, I see. Okay.
Well,
okay.
So, and we're going to decide it. So
I'll make a motion to remove.
Okay.
I'll second it because they sound curious. It's over when I get.
And of those voting, all in favor? Motion carries. Prescott Park, State Street parking lot.
Just another rough looking maple. The entire top portion of the tree is dead, and there are some basal wounds and just not a tree.
I move to remove.
Second. Second by Deb. Any discussion? Dennis.
The only thing I want to mention is that whole row going down to the water is in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, so we pruned. Are you speaking about the trees that are sort of flanking that brick walkway that's in there? Yeah, so we've already gone through within the last 2 years and did some deadwood pruning on those trees. I think they're getting to that point where they're just getting old and they're all starting to look a little haggard. So we do have eyes on it, and obviously Chris and Andy, who are the park attendants down there, they keep pretty regular tabs on those trees for me. So they are very often collecting debris, piling it up for us to come and collect. So certainly an ongoing thing, and we have a lot of good people looking at those trees. Yeah.
In a situation like that, especially at a Prescott Park or a really high traffic area, do you sort of start to be more proactive and start to think ahead, to think that whole strip's going to go? So instead of taking it all at once, you kind of tumble over replacements. So, you know, something visually is good.
I know that there are certain plans in place to potentially redo that entire park or portions of the park. So that's one thing where we're just at this point just trying to mitigate and just watch and monitor those trees. We're not really thinking ahead in that way yet. So
thank you.
We have a motion to recommend removal.
I move to remove.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I just wanted, not that there's anything wrong with getting old and looking haggard.
we have one falling off of you, yeah.
We go for South Mill Pond parking lot.
Yeah, just just a very poor looking tree. Lots of limbs have fallen off. We actually haven't really cleaned up that tree or done any pruning on it since I've been here. So the fact that it's looked like this for so long means that there were some significant limb failures in the past, and we just kind of flew under our radar until someone sent me a picture. And I went inside, and it looks like a really good spot to plant some new trees come springtime. So they're going to be cleaning that space up and get something else in there.
I move to remove. Second.
Dennis, all in favor?
Aye.
Couldn't find it.
Oh, okay.
Put it on the wrong side of the phone.
182 Colonial Drive.
So I keep getting the addresses wrong, but if this is the one that I'm thinking, it's the larger of the 2 trees. This had some significant pruning done to it by the utility company, while also having some significant limb failures. We cleaned that up. I think it was a late summer, early fall job, and it just, again, flew under the radar until we noticed it again. And ultimately, I think we're just ready to remove it.
I coincide with the sidewalk, that's one unit.
It doesn't coincide with it. It's not part of their removals, but really what's left of that tree, I don't think is suitable. That's the one with the two sort of broken. There's a, you can actually see where we stopped pruning, or stopped removing that leader failure. And then there was another big tear out as well.
And Max, when does it become, because this is, you know, power lines, and when is it an Eversource job, or when it's, whether it's the city job, where is that fine line?
As far as removals go, I think when they go through and do their pruning, that's instead of removal. So they've already gone through that community and cleared all their power lines. So at this point, the pruning and removal ultimately comes down to us, I suppose. If it was a tree that was going to or imminently impact their power lines, say a tree that appeared to be on the verge of failure, and it was an emergency scenario, they would likely go out and take care of that, even if it was a sick tree. Yeah, and in this case, they just pruned it. They had certain failures, and then same with the 170. I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but they pruned both of those trees extensively to a point where they just are just sad.
Extensively is the operative.
Yeah, so at a certain point, you know, they pretty much deemed these trees for removal themselves by just pruning. So
I picked up on that.
yeah.
Oftentimes they'll come to us and ask to remove them, and our direction is to not to remove them and pull, you know, do the best they can just to prune back, knowing full well that it may get to the point sometime that they need to.
The pruning is not a good advertisement for Eversource pruning.
No.
Bad.
Yeah.
They've gotten better.
They've gotten better.
It's gotten
but
better.
These two trees are not
Yes, this was
examples.
the
That's through Max and, you know, his staff's help. You know, they make it more sensitive to what they're doing.
Right. So great. Well, I move to remove both of them actually.
I second both of
Second by
those.
Deb. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'm remiss, I should be checking to make sure we don't have any participants online. We don't.
170 Colonial Drive.
Yeah, just
I think we just
We did a
They
combination.
did both.
I just
okay.
a motion to remove both of them.
I did it too.
Good. So we finished it. Public right-of-way planting request, Boston Regional Hospital. I know Patrick Cummins is here and somebody else.
Here's also great.
You're gonna have to give me some direction, Patrick, or
Yeah, absolutely.
Patrick's cohort.
Alex over here.
Hi, Alex. Nice to meet you.
We're Alex.
We're gonna go.
Hold on.
Oops, sorry.
Just had it up. There we go.
So we're here to, on behalf of the regional hospital, to coordinate plantings within the right of way as part of our satellite parking lot project. You can see closer to this is Borthwick Ave at the top of the page here. And we have 4 trees that we've coordinated with Max here, 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 and here. That would just borders the right of way, but nonetheless, we want to coordinate that with Max as well. So we are proposing this landscaping plan as part of our site plan approvals through the planning board to coordinate with you folks to get approval for these plantings as part of this project. We coordinate species with Max throughout this process, and we come to you folks for final review.
Any questions for Alex?
What do you propose?
What are the
Yeah.
species?
The species that we coordinated with Max were the swamp white oak and the Kentucky coffee tree, which Max recommended.
So the other ones are in the interstitial portion of the parking lot?
Yes, sir. Not really.
Any other questions?
Are those chosen because it's sort of swampo kind of, it's wet there?
Just how well those species tolerate urban conditions. So drought, salty soils, abundance of water, excessive sunlight, exposure, all those things they handle. And we plant these trees regularly in our redwoods as well. So tried and true species.
And they're pleasant looking.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So I guess the motion would be to grant approval for planting of these trees. I wasn't aware that we had jurisdiction on something thing. All in, well, make a motion to approve. Thank you, Michael. Second, Richard Mann. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Yes. We're very motivated.
Okay, follow up on 107 and 109 Union Street.
So Max, was Dave going to provide us an update?
So he got me in the hallway maybe the day after our last meeting and said that they were able to work in a bump out to facilitate those two trees. So as of right now, they are planning on keeping them, and that essentially that address is losing a street parking spot, but the trees will stay. Yeah.
And so has anybody told the resident who wrote the letter?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
As part of the project, we reach out to all the residents, so that'll be, if it hasn't already been done, it will be.
Because I was walking past there and I knocked on the window, but nobody answered, but I was just going to tell them the result of our last meeting.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether they were aware of where.
Yeah, I don't know if we still have that letter, which might have had some sort of contact, but.
So just for general procedure, I would really appreciate if the committee didn't reach out to residents, especially when we have projects, because if you make a statement and they, whatever reason, we come back and say that it's not reality because X, Y, and Z, they will say that they were told that by the committee that it would not happen. And believe it or not, committee statements do matter to people. And they do come back and have consequences for our operations. So I appreciate it. The committee, you can talk to residents and say, yes, thanks for bringing this to our attention. We're considering it, but the city staff will be replying to you.
Well, I do want to say that for the 3 people that are listening to this, that residents' letters make a huge difference. That letter was so beautifully crafted and was so wonderful that it gave us a lot of pause and it opened our eyes. So it does make a big difference.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think citizens should take heed.
I thank the staff for finding a way to work that out and preserve the trees. Plus for the city for that name. Okay. Now the educational part of our program. Not that all of it isn't education.
So Peter said we're here for about an hour going through. First thing, tree identification. Just doing some digging. Grab the tree, hold the tree, count the needles, smell the tree. We were over doing some of this morning. And just doing a little protective. A bunch of different people. Pat, one of hers, she said she got a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And
copyright 1958.
So there's the Peterson guides. There's all kinds of different guides, that kind of stuff. My favorite tree book right now is Forest Trees in Maine. You can look at it. But again, it's not our downtown trees for the most part. Those are the trees on the back 40 somewhere. The reason we like this book, good tough. And if you think it's an oak, it puts all the oaks together in one chart. Like you think it's maple, it puts all the maples together in one chart. So if you have to skip all the way to the end and not follow any of the directions in the beginning, you can just really flip through the book and get lucky and then get to a point.
Where are those available?
That one's actually available online. And I have a bunch at my office, so if people want them, I can get them around to folks. We buy them in bulk from the state of Maine. We could never put it together and build our own. Most of your guys already have them. I know. Corin has them, Chuck has them.
Maybe
maybe you didn't get one.
I'll buy one.
So we'll get them around to folks.
What I'd like to do is I'll have Stephanie reach out to you,
Sure.
and then maybe we can post it on our webpage, just so if residents are interested, here's the resources that they can purchase.
So this is my old trading book. And again, some of the old ones, real simple like stuff. So today we're going to start off with some easy ones and then go to the hard ones. And again, it's just about looking. What's this?
White pine.
Why?
Somebody just know that.
Yeah, some of you just know it, but why? It's a detective work.
Oh.
It's been in Peter's mind, white, 5 letters in white pine, little tiny needles. So what that means is when you grab a hold of this, there's a fascicle, a bundle, a bunch, a chunk of them, call it whatever you want. And there's generally 5 of these together. So pick some pieces off, hand it to your buddy down the line. Sometimes you're going to get 3, sometimes you get 4, 1 breaks off, but check the tree out in 3 or 4 different spots. Pine cones are actually very unique as well. Big long cones look like green bananas. You get a little curve to them. Cones are unique on every one of the trees. So if you just, you go out in the woods and you've got a dead tree, look around the ground, you can still identify a tree with no needles on it, hardly no bark on it. If you really need to, you take a wood sample, and every wood from every tree is different on the cellular level. So you can just look at a piece under a microscope and check it out. Some people are actually really good at just biting wood because all woods taste different. When I was in dendrology, which is tree identification, the field, all that kind of stuff, we had a classmate that he could bite any branch of any tree and tell you what it was with his eyes closed. I think he was good at it.
And AJ, if I could just interrupt you for a second, for anybody, I happened to stumble on a YouTube presentation of some of these city meetings, and so anyone that happens to be watching, this is AJ Dupree, a member of this committee, and the urban forester from the Urban Forestry Center here in Portsmouth. So just it's an introduction. Sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
A quick funny story. While studying dendrology at UNH, we would do field walks, and you would called out to identify a specific tree.
Sure.
And down by Thompson Hall, there was a vine growing up through the tree. I think it was a friend with Laura, and the kid went over there with his knife to cut it and bite it. You guys like, no, you can't do that. So they made it with poison ivy.
What sort of flavors do they present?
The salt's actually in the trees. So if you have horses and they gnaw on boards and fences and all that kind of stuff, they're going after some of those salts. And actually some of the sugars, in the wood if it's not already painted and all that kind of stuff. So that one's right now going around is 2 needles as well. So all the pines have multiple needles, so you just got to be able to count it. So that one happens to be a Scotch pine. There are 2 needles, and if you look at it carefully, they're a little bit twisted. So it looks like a bread twisty pine, that little sort of thing. And so Scotch pines were planted extensively all over the place for years as that sort of tree to get some privacy. Great lower needle retention, where white pines just take off and grow up. So it's the height of the building or the height of the whatever else, and really white cedar has taken over that spot within the industry. That Scotch pine is really tough, so a short, medium-sized tree. The last one in this is red pine, so 2 needles and very long compared to Scotch. And those are all the pines that you're going to run around in here, in the Victoria woodlot or way out in the woods someplace. Downtown, you're also going to run into Austrian pine, which looks very, very similar to that sample that Dick has in his hand. As far as 2 needles and long, it's a tree that you find in every parking lot. So if they're trying to put some green in the parking lot, they want to pile a ton of snow on it, that kind of stuff, Austrian pine instead of red because it deals with the salts. So it's Austrian, Japanese black pine, a lot of common name problems with these trees. Everything based on Latin, scientific names. We're not getting into any of that kind of stuff today because everybody just be snoozing.
Thank you.
So we can have that side after
Extra credit, Pat.
But when you're going places, it matters. If that's an eastern white pine that Peter has, there's a western white pine. almost the same tree, very different species, very different wood, very different everything else. It really depends where you're going. So we, out west, they probably call it white pine. We call it white, they forget the eastern western part, that kind of situation. This one, nice and easy one. Single needles, flat, very short. Usually has little white spots on the bottom of it. Those little white spots are hemlock woolly delta. So this tree isn't going by the wayside anytime soon in New Hampshire. We still have some good cold days. You can get freezing cold. I mean, nobody liked the cold weather this morning, but it's great for killing off those little buggers. You need some really good cold weather for a stretch. But hemlocks, around here, we've had some in the city. We've had them treated. You can put a couple water on them. You can put little bugs on them that actually eat the adelgid. We have actually got an insectarium at our place that we're growing the beetles to eat the adelgid, to feed off the beetles, to feed off it's kind of a mad science experiment.
How is that going?
We actually couldn't get the hemlock trees to get hemlock woolly adelgid. We kept bringing the adelgid to them. Our forest health guys, all that kind of stuff. Dennis just worked with Jen and Kyle and those guys. So they kept bringing adelgid in. I had adelgid, on our property. They kept bringing it into the little fenced in area and we couldn't get the adelgid to jump off the branch and trees. And we actually forced the growth. So we fertilized them really heavy, extra soft, nice, tender growth is what they go after. So we got, body trees that are 4 or 5 feet tall, 12 or 15 feet tall. And we fertilized the daylights out of them to get them to take off. We still couldn't get it to get them. Dennis and I worked on projects 20 years ago in Elwyn Park. And somebody gave me a little bucket of these bugs. I'm like, hey, shake it around the tree. Didn't tell me the things were like $3 a piece. Just throwing them around, I threw out like a couple $1,000 worth of bugs in a matter of a few minutes. It was supposed to go like all of Elwyn Park. I threw them on one tree. They forgot the little part of it. So Kyle was trying to grow them here. Because what happens as soon as they eat all the adelgid, then those bugs happen. So we're trying to keep a population going. I don't know where they're going to go.
An interesting project.
So pines, again, multiple needles. Hemlock, very different. Short, flat, can't roll the needle. Usually has a couple of white lines in it, but sometimes it gets confused for this tree. So this is your typical, everyday run-of-the-mill Christmas tree. So this happens to be a balsam fir. In the woods, hiking up in the lights, these needles are going to be flat off the stem on both sides to look very much like the hemlock. But this will grow in my backyard. Plenty of sun, plenty of fertilizer, plenty of compost, everything else. So it puts up more needles. And in the Christmas tree trade, there's a lot of crosses. So you can have Fraser fir, is a southern tree. You can have balsam fir in this area. Sometimes they take them across them. So identifying a specific Christmas tree can be really problematic. You can take those needles, crunch them in your hands, and it just kind of has that Christmas sort of smell to it.
My tree's still up.
Right.
It's still up.
How long does
Even
it?
what?
How long does it take for it to get to Christmas tree by?
How big Christmas tree you're looking for?
7 feet.
Yeah, probably about 10 years. If you really set a good stock, 5, 6 years and get 4 footer or so, but you got to put on that row. So we tell people 7 to 10 years. So this happens to be another fir, because fir trees, when you pull off that needle, it comes off and it has a little suction cup right to it. To me, it looks like one of those little Lego sort of nubs on a Lego block or whatever else. But fir trees have feet and they stick in the side of the tree. So grab a hold of this one, break a needle, smell it. So this one around the space, Peter keeps getting lost.
I always go by the flat needle versus like a square.
You can't roll it.
Can't roll it.
So fir have flat needles. They're soft. They're nice, easy on the hands, all that kind of stuff. And the flip side to that fir is this: it's a spruce tree. So this happens to be a row-based spruce. So again, if you take off a couple of needles, it's going to come.
Listen, demonstration.
So spruce is funky. Spruce has some little barbs to it. As you pull off a spruce needle, and if you're doing these kind of tests and that kind of stuff, make sure you're going around the back side of the tree, reach inside to it. Don't pull off all the needles, right on the front side. All these branches came from sort of the back side or up against the fence, because you don't want to cause big open spots outside the tree. But if you take off some of those needles off that spruce, this happens to be a Norway spruce, but there's always a little wooden peg, a little tooth peg, a little wooden spike at the bottom of those needles. And that's how you can tell spruce from fir. So the last two we're going to get into, pretty similar. Don't really have needles. They look more like scales or snake skin or whatever that you want to think that looks like. But it's still a needle. It's still a leaf. And all these trees have leaves, photosynthetic, remember 8th grade biology and all that kind of stuff in the sun, the solar, and everything else. So it's still doing the same work. And this is where common names become a problem. So this one happens to be a red cedar. So if you want to smell the end of it, barely got a little bit of purple in the wood. It's not really big enough to be there yet. And not make a hope chest or anything like that, or a blanket chest out of something this big. But when you cut this tree down, it's, it's really red. It's really, really purple. It looks like Dennis coat on the inside. It's got a little bit of a smell to it. That's that stage. It's not really actually a cedar. So it's a juniper.
Red cedar.
Yep. So this one is the arborvitae. White cedar, depends whether you're buying or selling what you call it for a common name. So it's white cedar, pretty tough, hardy tree. Gets put up against, every dumpster, every fence, every, utility project, whatever you're trying to hide in the backyard. This tree maintains a, sailors, or soldiers' horse. You can plant up a whole roll of them. The most impressive stand of these that I've seen, I've actually got to work on them. If you go on Route 4, go over what is a new General Sullivan Ridge, and going up, Route 4 to Durham, there's a line of these on the side of the road, and they shear those things on a regular basis. They put thousands of man hours into those, and they're perfect. So we take pictures of those presentation. This has tons of cultivars. Basically, cultivars and varieties are what sort of mess us up when we go into the urban environment, because trees are grown in a particular color, particular scent. They've been working on acornless oak trees for years. It's never really taken off.
That'd be good for her.
But if you go look to identify a tree, you're like, hey, there's got to be some acorn somewhere, and then they're not. So it's create a problem with that. So you can feel those really, sort of flat needles stretched out, little scaly looking, with that red cedar or the juniper, a little grabby. Not as tough as a spruce, but those are all over the place in little lots. These, you're hardly ever going to find. The other mix to this is Atlantic white cedar. We have, I think, 2 populations of them here in Portsmouth. One is down at the condo across from, going down to where Walmart is and that kind of stuff. There's a condo association back there. There's Atlantic white cedar swamp.
Oh.
So it's going to look very similar to that, but you're going to be right in a swamp.
The cedars.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the cedars.
Okay, good. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We can tell the cedar.
That's a big standout in a great bog.
Yeah. So questions on the whys and the hows and the detective works that you've got to do.
What's the difference between a juniper and a cedar?
Essentially 2 different trees. So the junipers themselves, small, prickly, tougher needles.
Yeah.
Really tall-like. It looks like one needle sticking out. These are relatively short.
Yeah.
So a little scraggly, look in the woods, grow in areas, kind of off the beaten path on a trail. They'll get 6-8 inch diameter. These white cedars or arborvitaes. There's ones the Lee traffic circle. These things are 40 feet tall.
Yeah.
Will
the juniper get tall? I mean, if left to it.
Some varieties will.
Yeah.
So they have very columnar junipers.
Yeah.
And you can fit it. It's as big as a 50-gallon drum, and it'll grow up tall like that. So when we have cultivars and different growths like that, if you're looking for a specific pattern, this book in the bottom of my box, it's Michael Behr's book, and that's the one that you go looking for those specific cultivars. Cultivars are just a sort of a generic screw up that somebody's capitalized on and made some money on it. Everybody's seen a dwarf out of a spruce. Well, look at the heritage. Look back at it. Came from Canada. 2 guys were riding on a train. They saw it, grabbed it, took off with a whole bunch of them, brought them down to Boston. Grew them down in Jamaica Plains at the Island of Arboretum. Boom, they've got a brand new tree. But every once in a while, a white spruce tree will grow out of the side of a dwarf evergreen spruce, and it's really funny to see it because it wants to be a white spruce, 60 feet tall, 30 feet wide. The dwarf part of it is sort of generic sort of growth spurt within that tree, and they capitalize on it by market. 6 feet tall, 6 feet wide, really, really dense, tight little needles. Great tree for a little sort of cold sort of spot. But every once in a while, nature will take over, and we get calls at the office every once in a while. Somebody, has a tree, or they moved into a new house, whatever else. They got this giant limb growing out of the side of it, and so nature will also come back. And
There's several of those in the Catholic cemetery.
Yeah, I was thinking.
yeah,
I know something.
So, you know, if Picea glauca is what it wanted to be, right? You know, Picea being all spruce, that's glauca being white. But that dwarf emperor spruce is just that sort of, you know, natural growth habit of that tree that, you know, somebody just wanted to know about. The other trees that you're going to find around here that are not evergreens that we think, you know, maybe misnomering evergreens, Tamarack larch. Needles in the summer, full leaves, obviously in the fall, so it's not an evergreen tree. And then my favorite tree, the Don Redwood.
Yeah.
So Mike's got one or two of those down in the back corner.
One right out in front.
We got one up front.
That's right.
That's still
Those
incredible.
new plants.
So people, you know, people think it's evergreen, it's dying in the fall. So we get calls from the new homeowners that hey, you look great. It's okay, it's deciduous. You know, it's going to lose out its needles and will come back next year. Tough, you know, hard to work.
The state champion is over on Richards Ave.
Yeah, I knew about that one. Yeah, that's a big one over there. Oh, behind a couple of those houses. We measured that one years ago. Question on evergreens. If you have an evergreen that you just can't figure it out, you know, take a picture, bring it back to, you know, one of the next meetings, email it to me, whatever else. Take a picture, you know, from a distance, up close, you know, really get some of the facts, see if it hurts somebody on the way by. Because all these blues factor into, you know, getting some of that scientific information out of there, but it can still be fun. Skip the Latin. We had 300 of these trees in Latin, flashcard, Pat was having, you know, flashbacks, all the flashcards, everything else we were talking this morning. And that takes the fun out of it. But we had to, you know, just had to get through it and call. But really, it's sort of fun, just, you know, go walk around the woods, trying to get that stuff. And you can actually tell what's going on with the tree health as well. All these trees are in, you know, abnormally good and happy situation. Most of them came from my backyard. Life's got horses, so compost, and the trees grow like crazy.
What would be good? Do we plant a lot of? Is that part of our plan out in the city?
No, typically.
No, it's not.
We put a few in here and there. We've done Norway spruce a few times.
Yeah.
So Norway spruce, you know, giant, you know, spruce trees right along, like coming out of north out of the track circle, right along where the fishermen, you know, commercial fishermen places. What's the name?
Oh yeah.
So you know, giant trees. Really takes up a lot of space. So a lot of towns use them as a living Christmas tree because they're a really tough tree, but it, you know, needs some space. So we haven't put in a lot of evergreens. We've done a few downtown.
I think out of the 100 plus we planted last spring, there was only one. And it's behind the library. And it's a very specific kind of, it's like a weeping, I didn't even tell you. Yeah, sorry, but it's behind the library.
Is there
So that's your mission. Go behind the library for a weeping tree and figure out what it is.
Is there more opportunity for it, and or it's just not appropriate, or what's the reason?
So where we buy our trees, they don't offer these as bare root purchasable trees, and then where we're typically trying to plant, these trees just aren't appropriate, essentially.
You know, this is a park, not in a city, you know, sidewalk strip. Because most of these all want to be 20, 30 feet wide at the base. You know, spruce trees will retain their needles almost all the way to the ground. So we're always fighting that, you know, clearance and cars and seeing and visibility, you know, all those kind of things. But there's plenty of park around the city, you know, that can be put into and break things up. But
I have a Siberian spruce.
Yeah.
Down in the cemetery that Dick recommended.
Yeah.
It's on the Woodbury lot. It's really taken off.
good, tough, hardy tree.
Those beautiful purple cones.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Takes to urban problems, you know, really well. You know, root, you know, all the same problems we caused all the other trees and that kind of stuff. But that will take really well to it.
Well, thank you, AJ. He was so energetic when we stole this. We had to share and under time. So, yeah.
So the guidebook that you guys have going around with you, one that we made up for families and that kind of stuff. So we're going to have that. We've got copies of it. We're trying to get it online. We work for the state, so online doesn't happen very fast with us.
I'll put a plug in for the American Conifer Society as a website resource. They didn't have much of a website years ago, but it's come quite a ways, and you can look up plants, and they're also very into dwarf conifers, which I've learned the hard way are always dwarf. But they're also a great option if you want to plant a conifer, but you don't have that kind of space. So, and I've noticed more walking around town, more residents are using them. So, really an asset.
Thank you, AJ.
Hello, thank you for participating in the 400 for the 400 project.
Sorry.
Enforcement.
I was queuing up for the next discussion.
You're out, Max.
Oh, what? I'm sorry.
You're up.
You're out. You're not out.
Oh,
City Avarice.
yeah, so we've actually hired a arborist technician, start date to be determined, but it's imminent at this point. Yeah, just still plugging away at the 400 for 400 planting project. That's kind of the biggest thing on the horizon at this point. And then just slowly plugging away at these removals. We're trying to get all of our retrenchment, pruning done this time of year because it's such a big hit to the trees. So we have a few projects, but I think the biggest thing on my horizon at least is the 400 for 400. So, yeah.
You must have been very busy with the storms. I've noticed a big limb was down right out here in this park.
Yeah.
And that was substantial. That was a pretty big one, didn't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
it looked dangerous.
Ultimately, the only thing, Dennis actually had sent a message to me to update and include whenever a tree fails or something like anything that's caused by a storm. He requested that I share that with the committee, and we've actually feel like we've dodged quite a number of bullets within the last few storms. Even looking in Newcastle, I remember taking a little drive out there just because I heard of how many trees had failed and impacted their utility lines. So I think we've been pretty fortunate that we've really only had to remove one tree that was leaning really heavily. And that was the only thing that I can think in the last couple of storms that has really caused us some grief. So
a number on Little Harbor, they're on private property.
Yeah,
it's probably state property too.
They were Mets, shared the bad news. I really got the call of that bad news. It was out to our buddy Chuck's house.
Yeah.
They were locked in for a couple of days.
Yeah.
That was a tough one. Yeah.
But I think Denny, Chuck's wife, said we wouldn't mind being stuck down.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I mean, so the city did clean up his driveway so he could come and go as he pleased, but there were still hanging trees that were not city property. So ultimately we helped out a resident and left the rest to the state. So
it's already been took down the hanger. It must have cost 12 minutes to take down that big one.
Yeah,
go back to it.
Perfect.
So you got down.
Oh, awesome.
Thanks, Max. Tree planting for the city's 400th.
Yeah.
So what did I do with that?
And before I just wanted to say, you were talking about hiring a technician. I trust that Peter has some sort of a knack for hiring people that not only regarding trees, not only know trees, but are passionate about them. And I appreciate that.
I'm
very well served by that.
I have to say that I'd like to take credit for that, but it kind of starts with one good hire and then they just like multiply and the like people like to get like people instead of, so I have to attribute that good hires and stuff to Corin and Max and Chuck. Let me see if I can find where I just put that. I want to make sure it shows up on the. All right.
There we go.
So working with AJ and Max, our stormwater technician, Danny O, I can never pronounce his last name.
Will plan to present some of the 400
together
years of
something.
Portsmouth past. And this living monument will exist long into the future. If you follow this video guide carefully and thoroughly.
All right, I'll start from the beginning just so you.
Hello, thank you for participating in the 400 for the 400 project in Portsmouth. The tree will plan to present some of the 400 years of Portsmouth past. And this living monument will exist long into the future. If you follow this video guide carefully and thoroughly. Before receiving a tree, it is state law that you call Big Safe at 811 to make sure the location where you want to plant a tree is free of utilities such as buried gas, cable, electric, water, or sewer lines. DigSafe is a free service that lets utility providers confirm you will not disrupt any services or cause safety problems when you dig a hole to plant your tree. Next, use the information sheet you'll receive to determine the best location in your property for the tree. Be aware of any other trees that might compete with the sapling for water and light, general soil conditions, and other site conditions, such as overhead clearance, how much sunlight the area receives, and any poor drainage that may negatively impact the tree now and 30 years from now. Once an appropriate site is selected, prepare for planting. Please wear appropriate personal protective equipment, such as work gloves, protective eyewear, and durable boots while planting the tree to limit injury to yourself and others. You will need several hand tools to plant the tree. A spade shovel is the main earth mover. A trowel or gardening hand tool will be used for small, delicate soil movement around the base of the tree. Your hands are acceptable for this too. A water hose or bucket will be needed for watering the tree during and after planting. A set of hand prunes for removing broken limbs or roots, and a box cutter or scissors for remove packaging. The packaging that covers the roots of your tree cannot be planted. Remove all packaging material, including burlap, nylon, twine, or metal wire. Pay special attention to any roots that may have grown through the packaging and protect as much as possible. Delicately remove excess soil that is clinging to the base of the tree and root ball. Look for the root collar because you adjust the depth of the planting hole depending on the root collar located at the base of the tree trunk, the first root growth that extends away from the center of the tree. It is not necessary to remove all soil from the root ball, but it is important to locate the root collar. Next, you'll determine the depth of the hole needed for the tree. Stand the tree upright and measure the height of the root collar from the ground. The root collar should stand 2 inches above the surface level of your yard. This is critical for the long-term health of the tree. It's also important to dig a wide hole that is 2 to 3 times the diameter of the root ball. You may now begin digging, periodically placing the tree into the hole to gauge how much more dirt needs to be removed. If you find you've removed too much and the root collar is at or below grade, start adding dirt back in. Make sure you compact the soil as much as possible before planting because loose soil can cause undesired settling after you water the tree. Ideally, the sides of the hole are softly angled and tapered to the bottom, as opposed to steep or perfectly vertical walls. Next, prune back any broken branches before the tree is planted and before they grow out of reach. Once the tree is at an appropriate depth inside the hole, you can begin to fill the space around the root ball with dirt you removed from creating the hole. Fill the hole by watering in the loose soil surrounding the root ball, filling the area around the root ball with dry dirt, and watering it in again. This compacts the soil and will hold the root ball in place. Fill in the soil around the roots to the level of surrounding soil of your yard, keeping the root collar 2 inches above that level. Do not plant grass or use clumps of grass to remove while digging around your tree, as the grass will compete for light and water with the tree. After planting, you want to create a berm of soil, as you see here. This berm serves several purposes. It collects rainwater and establishes a zone that will protect the tree from mowing and trimmers. Plus, it will retain the 2 to 3 inches of mulch you want to spread evenly on top of the planted root ball. It is important to keep mulch and the moisture it retains away from the root collar to help prevent any tree health or structural issues that could occur in the future. Staking your tree is optional, will not be necessary once the tree is established in the ground. If you do use stakes, use horticulture tape or other low abrasion materials so you do not damage the delicate outer layer of the tree. You will want to water the tree immediately after planting to ensure total root saturation. Additional watering will depend on the season, but your tree should get at least 5 gallons of water once a week, double in the summer, until the tree is established. And that's it. You've successfully planted a tree. Be aware that your tree may suffer from temporary transplant shock. You may not see any leaves, or the tree may shed its leaves, or even produce water sprouts along the main trunk. The Trees and Public Greenery Division usually gives trees a full calendar year to establish, so be patient and continue to water. If the tree is dry and brittle and it's very clearly dead, there's still a chance of full recovery and removal is the only option. But generally, trees will reward those who plant them. Remember, the best time to plant a tree for tomorrow is today.
Very informative.
How did that come about, Peter? Max?
We were meeting and talking about how do we do educational stuff to get people aware of how they should be planting, and we talked about cards, and we just came to the decision that Dan had done a bunch of educational videos for the city relative to stormwater and collecting dog poop and other stuff. So we said, well, this would be a good opportunity for Dan to show his talents.
Well done. Yeah, it's great. Great.
Really, yeah, I learned a lot. I planted a tree last year and go. So what is the roll up then for, messaging to the, public to get the view and think about your backyard and what's.
We're in the process of doing that. This was the kind of the final piece to the puzzle. So Stephanie Secord will be posting. They may already be posted. I don't know, Max. I know you and AJ were talking to her last week and this year, just recently.
Yeah.
So that should be rolled out soon. So we'll be, just making sure we reach out to folks. We want to make sure we do our best to do areas that typically are underserved. So, maybe work with Portsmouth Housing Authority, make sure they're aware, and reach out to other folks as well. So,
but I did pull out that tree equity score piece that I sent around, and it's just another tool to use. And as Pat said, we're 81. Yeah, we get an 81 in Portsmouth.
South B, right?
Yeah, well, we're on our way. Still some, but.
And I would encourage the committee. This is an opportunity to talk to residents and let them know that this is an opportunity.
The tree equity. I couldn't pull up the Portsmouth score. I was doing something wrong, but it caused me to think about in conjunction with the Portsmouth 400. The history of tree planting in Portsmouth. And it seems to me, and Dick probably knows more about it than anyone else, but not because he was there, but I think I have a sense from photos and whatever that in the 19th century, there was a lot of trees were planted. You look on city streets and Richards Avenue and that there's a greater awareness of the value of trees, and that little thing that we have on our letterhead from Andrew Jackson Downing about the value of planting trees on streets. And it's my sense is, and I'd love to see a history of that in just in Portsmouth. It wasn't necessarily, I don't think, a socioeconomic thing. Just a general sense in the community of the value of trees. And then, the last big tree planting in Portsmouth, probably Frank Jones. And I think he died at the end of the 19th century. And then, I don't know whether it was World War I, the Depression, World War II, I have a sense that tree planting wasn't a high priority. And then the progress of the middle of the 20th century, where we took Middle Street and Islington Street, which were tree lined, and between the Dutch elm disease and progress of widening the streets, everything was cut down and nothing replaced. And it wasn't, I don't think, from the time Frank Jones died until 1968, when Charlie Vaughan and Sam Maddock and Clotilde Strauss started what we're trying to follow through on. There were no trees planted, and there was not almost a hostile attitude from certain departments in the city, which now are very, very supportive and leading the way in terms of making sure that trees are incorporated in every project.
Fireplace didn't like trees.
So anyway, how trees got planted or where they got planted really was what we'd now look at, say, what, just a lack of planning, a lack of thoughtfulness. And I guess it was, that was not part of the thinking of people in the much later times. So, but anyway, enough of my rants. Is there any old business? Any new business?
There's a large dead pine in the parking lot of Spinnaker. I don't know if it's our committee or Cameron or.
Yes, yep, it is on my radar.
Who's working out?
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn, but it says we don't need one. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.